This week on Mutuality Matters.
And tell us, what does mukti mean?
Mukti is, she was intentional about word choices. Very, brilliant woman. Um, that's not the Hindu word for salvation.
Okay.
The Hindu word for salvation is moksha. She says, no, that is a Hindu word and it's only meant for high caste men.
Oh.
I want salvation for the girls that I'm rescuing.
Thanks for joining us this week, and welcome to Mutuality Matters, a podcast hosted by CBE International. Let's get into this week's episode.
Hello, you are listening to CBE's podcast, Mutuality Matters, Women in Scripture and Christian History. This Mutuality Matters thread considers the stories of women in our Bible and in our Christian history and what they have to say to us today. As many of you faithful listeners likely know, part of my heart resides in India after living and working there for 4 years. So I'm really excited about today's interview, where we get to learn about an amazing woman named Pandita Ramabai. And I'll be talking with Dr. Boaz Johnson. Thank you for being here, Dr. Johnson. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your expertise?
Well, thank you so much, Kim. I so appreciate you welcoming me to this forum. I am a professor at North Park University, which is in Chicago, an amazing school. And I did most of my studies in India at the University of Delhi in economics. And in public accounting and the such, and then I did a master's of theology at Union Biblical Seminary in India. I pastored churches in the slum. I was reared in a New Delhi slum, so I went back and pastored churches there. I taught at the seminary, and then did my PhD work in Old Testament, Hebrew, and ancient Near Eastern languages and literature before I started teaching at North Park University.
Wow, that is a vast life of experience. So I'm so glad you're here today. You mentioned it a little bit, but tell us a bit about your background and what led to your interest in Pandita Ramabai specifically.
I came to know Jesus through Pandita Ramabai's writings.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
Wow.
it's she reached out to kids like me. If you've seen Slumdog Millionaire, that's my story. And girls from my neighborhood, as soon as they got their first period, would vanish because the families were owned by high caste money lenders. And so they would just vanish, and we all knew where they went. And so when I read about Pandita Ramabai, her story, I said, I want to know more about this woman and why she did what she did, because she would speak to my slum dweller young people amazingly.
So then, can you explain the conditions in which Ramabai grew up and how she came to be so respected in India? That's part of my question, but my other part of the question is, and I might have you start with this, how did you even have access to Ramabai's writings? Because she's from the late 1800s, so how did you
Yes.
come in contact with her writings?
That is something that I'm a little hazy about, but it's kind of understandable that there were people who were influenced by Pandita Ramabai, and her autobiography, which is a very thin volume, is what someone gave me, and I said, "Oh, I want to really learn about this woman and why she's doing what she's doing is because of her relationship with Jesus."
Okay. Wow. Okay, so then let's rewind and because she was a famous Hindu scholar.
Yes.
And then she became a Christian. So can you give a little bit of that story? The background of her Hindu scholarship and her background?
Sure. Pandita Ramabai was born when there were a lot of famines, one famine after another. Her father was a high caste Hindu, but because of the famines, he went into poverty and they were going from one town to another. Um, but one of the things her father did was he noticed that these missionary women were very intelligent. And so he said, I want my daughter to be intelligent. And against the laws of Hinduism, he started teaching her Sanskrit, which is a no-no. You'll be killed if you do that. But he was courageous. He taught her Sanskrit and would continue to teach her during these journeys from, as they were going homeless, people from one town to another. She would have, and then they died very young, her parents.
did.
And she, what she held on to is her knowledge of Sanskrit and the reading of the Vedas, which was supposed to be a secret again.
Only
Women
for
are
men.
not supposed, yes.
Only for high caste men, right?
Only high caste men can ever touch. If a low caste man or a high caste woman touches the Vedas, that person's mouth and ears and nose has to be filled with lead, because, and then they were supposed to be banished or killed. So
So that's the world she entered, knowing it all, having touched it, read it, memorized it,
that is correct.
and they didn't kill her or fill her with cement or lead.
She kept it a secret,
Oh, okay.
like women have done throughout history.
Okay.
She kept it a secret, and then finally reached a city called Calcutta. And in Calcutta, there was a movement going on where Christians were reaching out to high caste Hindu men, and they became followers of Jesus. Ramabai was influenced by them, and they got to know that, my goodness, here's a woman who knows Sanskrit.
Oh.
So she became the first Sanskrit professor at one of the first universities in India, probably the first university, called Calcutta University
Wow.
of Sanskrit, because of these men who cared about women and the gospel.
But she was still Hindu at that time.
She was still Hindu.
Okay.
Yes.
And India really valued her as a nation.
Not at that time.
Oh, okay.
Yes. At that time also, it was a highly controversial thing that these scholars did at Calcutta University.
Okay. So then why did she leave Hinduism? Was it because of those scholars? What happened?
So her husband died when she was very young, and she was left with a little baby girl, a few months old.
Oh my.
And while she was taking care of the possessions of her husband, she found a copy of the book of Luke. And she says, what? My husband is delving with this Christian thing? But she says, he was special. He honored me. He was also low caste.
Okay.
She went against the trend in so many ways.
I was going to say she broke all the rules.
She did. She says, I'm going to marry a low caste person.
Okay.
Who was, because of missionaries, he was educated,
Okay.
quite highly educated. But he honored her, and she says, I want to find out more about my husband. There's obviously a secret life that he was leading for him to be reading this Christian book. She read it, and she says, I want to follow this Jesus.
Wow.
And she became a Christian, a follower of Jesus at that point, not Christian in that sense. And then she heard about sisters in the UK, in London, who were willing to take her in and train her up in the Christian scriptures, train her up in Greek and Hebrew and Latin. and then they were doing work among the poorest of poor people in London. So she learned all that, during her time at this work among of the sisters there of the Anglican Church.
Wow. Okay, we're going to take a short break so CBE can update you on what's going on, and we'll be right back.
CBE International presents Women in Scripture and Mission. In 1883, Pandita Ramabai was convinced that Christ was good news for Indian women who suffered from child marriage, wife burning, the denial of education, temple prostitution, abandonment, and more. She converted to Christianity, translated the Bible into the local language, and founded the Mukti Mission, which housed 800 abandoned babies, the blind, the handicapped, abandoned mothers, and the ill. Learn more at radiowomen.org.
Hi, welcome to Mutuality Matters, where we're talking with Dr. Boaz Johnson about Dr. Pandita Ramabai. And he just gave us the background of her becoming a Christian. And now we're going on to the rest of the story of Ramabai. I know she established a home called the Mukti Mission. Mm-hmm. It's a home of refuge. Can you talk about really what this meant and how she structured the home to embody Galatians 3:28 that really challenged the deeply entrenched caste of India?
I'm glad, Kim, that you introduced her as Pandita Ramabai. Just a little bit of a background about that word, Pandita, the title. It's a title. That's not her first name. And it's higher than a doctor. So I am not a pundit.
Okay.
I am a regular
Dr.
Boaz Johnson.
Okay.
This is a higher status that any Hindu can reach for her to be called Pandita Ramabai. She went back to the place where she was born in a city called Pune, where I was teaching at a seminary called Union Biblical Seminary. So I made constant trips to Mukti Sadan that she established. She saw high caste Hindu men abusing girls. There were the famines one after another. There was a bubonic plague. So 1889, thereabouts, she started the Mukti. She would go from village to village and she would say, I know you're hiding a girl there. Get the girl out. And she would barge into the house. Wow. She was a short woman, really short. And then 1914, the pandemic hit. Millions of people died. And people, in the pretext of the pandemic at that time, were abusing girls, taking them into they would go into these, quarantine tents and get girls out from there. She rescued hundreds of girls to establish her house of Mukti.
And tell us, what does Mukti mean?
Mukti is, she was intentional about word choices. Very, brilliant woman. That's not the Hindu word for salvation.
Okay.
The Hindu word for salvation is moksha. She says, no, that is a Hindu word and it's only meant for high caste men.
Oh.
I want salvation for the girls that I'm rescuing. So she intentionally chose the word mukti, and she did that throughout her Bible translation work.
Wow. Okay, so mukti means salvation.
It does.
Okay, and the home was set up for these girls. And what did she do? I've done a little bit of reading about her work. So how was that house established, whether you were high caste, low caste? From what I've read, women came from widows and from abuse, and there were girls, and they were from all kinds of different castes, which means they had rules about how they were supposed to act, and she kind of broke those rules.
She did. She made it clear when girls came in, when parents brought their girls, and actually there were parents who brought little babies who they were about to kill right in front of her doorstep. she made it clear to them that there is no caste system in this house. All the girls are treated equally. All the girls are educated and fed equally. That was groundbreaking. I mean, Gandhi may say stuff, but he didn't do stuff like this that Pandita Ramabai did.
Yeah, so powerful. Okay, one of the things I love about Pandita Ramabai, and it's probably obvious from the beginning of the interview, was that she was so brilliant. She didn't just, and I shouldn't even say just, she didn't set up a mission to rescue people. She was thinking, like you said, about word choice.
Yes,
and that
yes.
led to her, with her Greek and Hebrew and all the language she learned, rewriting the Bible in Marathi, in her local language.
Yes.
Can you explain why she did that, why that was so necessary?
That was, it's important to also understand that women were not supposed to be reading and writing. She looked at the Marathi translation that the church was using, published by the Bible Society of India, and she saw all these words, for God, for example. The word for God, in which is the same as my language, which is Hindi, is Ishvar or Parmeshvar. And she says, what? This is the God of the high caste Hindus. Vishnu, God, who does horrible things to girls and to women. Why are you using this word? And then she looked at the word for heaven, and it's the word Svarga. And she wrote in her diary, she took careful notes. She took one verse of the Bible and wrote 2 pages of notes, and
Wow.
it's still there in the archives, and I did a lot of research work in the archives. She says, heaven, Svarg, is the place where only high caste men go, and when they go, no one below high caste men is allowed. Only 1% of the population is allowed there, and they're given 70 low caste virgins as a gift when they go there. And so she said, no, why did you translate this as Varg? Why did you translate the man as the high caste man? So she was very careful about words she chose, and she said, I don't want my girls to be reading this Bible. It's so destructive to their minds. It's the mind of Hinduism. I need to translate the Bible so that the Bible is for everyone, especially for girls that I'm rescuing. And unfortunately, in the history of Bible translation, we have seen that not only in India, but all over the world.
Yes, that's true. I was just reading about the Bible translations in Burma. That's just one that I was just reading about, but that's true. I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit. I've heard you talk about your experience in New Delhi as a young boy and how those poor Bible translations affected you or how you understood it. Could you comment on that a little bit?
Yes, I think so. When I became a Christian, I was in high school at that point in time, so I was thinking through things, I think, rather well. My mom died at 14, and so I think that probably accelerated my process of becoming an adult.
Yes.
And I was
Yes.
thinking through all of these issues, and I would read the Bible. So Proverbs chapter 31, for example, the woman there is translated in my language as a coy, submissive girl. Woman.
Proverbs 31, woman?
Yeah.
She's so powerful.
Yes, that's in my translation, and that's what Pandita Ramabai dealt with. I said, yes, I don't want to read this Hindi Bible. I want to read Pandita Ramabai because she has translated the Proverbs 31 woman to be this figure that everyone should look up to.
Yes.
Not only women, but men, and yes, high caste men.
Yes.
And I said, I don't want my Hindi Bible. I won Pandita Ramabai's Bible,
Wow.
which is a different language, by the way.
Right, because you speak Hindi or Hindustani?
Hindi, yes.
Hindi, and then she spoke Marathi.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I must tell you this, while we were on that her Bible translation to this day is not accepted by the church in Maharashtra. To this day. And they had the government of India instituted a 100th year anniversary in which they retranslated her translation so that it would be in conformity with high caste language.
Wow.
Because they thought she didn't understand Marathi. Can you believe it?
Wow, that was the reason. They thought she didn't. She was so brilliant. Of
Yes.
course she understood Marathi.
This is horrible, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, it's horrible.
And I would compare the two translations. I would say, you have destroyed Pandita Ramabai by doing this.
Which means they missed the whole reason she retranslated it. Wow. Okay, we're going to have to go. But listeners, CBE International has a lot of resources from Boaz Johnson, and he has been a speaker at many of our conferences. So if you want to learn more about Pandita Ramabai, about Boaz Johnson and his background, please come to our website, which contains the largest resources for egalitarian theology. So that's just a plug, but there's so much more. I will also have in our show notes links to the works that Dr. Boaz Johnson has written or presentations he's given where you can learn so much more. So thank you for joining us today, and stay tuned to our new episodes coming to you from our incredible team of co-hosts. But in the meantime, please do go to those show notes and we'll have everything that you want there. Our website is www.cbeinternational.org, where we do have the world's largest collection of egalitarian content, and there's videos, there's audio, there's so much you can get there. In the meantime, I'm Kimberly Dixon, and I'd like to thank our CBE technological team that makes these podcasts possible, and we are Mutuality Matters. Thanks for listening.
Mutuality Matters podcast, along with thousands of CBE's other resources and content, is available for free on CBE's website, which is possible because of donor support. Together, we can spread the message that God calls women and men of all cultures, races, and classes to share authority equally in service and in leadership in the home, church, and world. Give today at cbe.today/donate.